Hi, I have a question for you. Can you pick up something really cool in a minute? That's it. Can you make this box now? Apparently not. I am not surprised. Watching this, I noticed a dozen things I didn't have time to show you in a minute. So let's add a few notes. I know it looks easy, and it is. But once that needle gets hot, the plastic starts sticking to it. So greasing it with Vaseline will help with that. Another thing to do is to get several needles. So when one gets too hot or too messy, you can quickly switch to a cold or clean one. And use a light touch or you will cut the plastic all the way through. If your project springs holes in the oven, close them shut with your needle. It will look messy at first, but the dents will bake out when you reheat the plastic again. And you will have to reheat it, because once the plastic cools enough, it will stop working. That's how you know it needs a reheat, which won't take quite as long as the first bake, just a few extra minutes. So don't walk away, keep an eye on it. I bake on a ceramic tile because it keeps the heat in longer than a cookie sheet, and therefore it will give you a longer work time. And for the same reason, when you get it out of the oven, set it out on a wooden cutting board, which is a good insulator, so the tile doesn't lose heat too quickly. It's all about keeping the tile as hot as possible during the whole process. Speaking of which, it will be too hot to touch without a glove or an oven mitt. I wear a glove only on the hand that I turn the project with, and keep the other hand gloveless, so I have the control necessary to work the needle sensitively enough. Now, for a full disclosure, the original 1-minute video speeds up the process 4 times. And that gives you completely unrealistic expectation of how quickly you will whiz through this process. So here are a few strokes in real time, so you know what to expect. Now, here is an important update. The brown sheet you see under this project is a Teflon sheet. And it is by far the best product I found for baking and ironing PLA. So when you watch some of my older videos that deal with baking and ironing and hear me recommend parchment paper or silicone baking mats, ignore it and get these. They are the best for avoiding the dents and imperfections on the underside of your project. The link is in the Tools and Materials section in the description. Once the piece is marbled, it's time to let it cool down. And the best place for that is between 2 marble tiles. It speeds up the cooling process and prevents any unwanted warping. If the points are unruly and have strands hanging from them, trim them. And you are done with the lid part. Now, what about the other parts? Marbling the side is not all that different, but you may be wondering, how do you shape it? As usual, we'll start flat and shape later. When you are making a long straight strip, it's best to start with a ruler for the first line. And then the first line will serve as a ruler for the second line, and so on. Make some contrasting color stripes of your choice, and make sure the strip is ever so slightly longer than you think you'll need, because the edges will come out messy and you will need to trim them. Check for holes, and if you see any, close them, or they will open even more in the oven. And then bake as usual. In the meantime, let's get a few needles ready. I am planning to make the first row of stripes about 1/2 inch apart, hence the grid guide. I missed a few holes, so I'm going to mend them now before the strip needs a reheat, and I can tell that point is coming. Time to reheat for a few minutes. Once I have the first row of stripes done, I turn it around and go the other way in between the first stripes. Conceivably, you could do this with a marbling comb in just 2 passes, but so far I haven't had great results with that. You're definitely more in control with doing each line individually. When done, check if it's cold enough not to be sticky anymore, and put your marble tile on it. And we have a marbled strip. Trim the messy edges and we are ready to hot water form, just like in the bracelet video. Left is to seal the seam. Edges of the box will need a bit of leveling to make sure both sides sit straight on the table. Also, the inner seam may need a bit of cleanup, but overall the sanding part is pretty minimal since all the other surfaces are already finished from the oven. Now we'll need a base for our box. Trace your circle for size, because that will depend on the size of the bottle you formed it on. And fill the circle up carefully and tightly. And then, and this is important as you will see shortly, Trace it all around with at least 5 lines thick fence. And I recommend doing at least 1 or 2 more extra cross layers to prevent potential holes, because you won't have any time to deal with them. Bake. And now for the scary part. Stick it on immediately so it is perfectly centered, and you have only one chance to do it right, because you cannot reposition this. Once you let go, that's it. That's why you need that extra room around your base. There is not much room for error. When it's on, remove it immediately to a cool tile so your sides don't start buckling from the heat. And if you are not perfectly in the center, like so, trim the edge so you are. That's where your slightly larger circle will save you. And then finish the seam all around by sanding it a bit. And now for the cherry on top. Actually, it looks more like a blackberry. You will need a little piece of straightened filament. Here I am using my bead template, but any little circle will do. And tape the filament down so it stays put. And then build your bead 1/2 at a time. Need a hole in the middle of the lid to attach it. But if you don't want to bother, the handle is entirely optional. What is not optional, however, is something to keep the lid from falling off the box all the time and to keep it shut. And that is the flange. Use your traced circle again. Make an extra layer or 2, and this time you don't need the extra fence around it. Bake it. Baking in general will give you one brilliantly glossy side and one matte side. So decide which one you want to face the inside of the box. And this time you will need to sand the edge so it just perfectly fits the inside of the box snugly. Now we are ready for the final assembly. Handle first. Clamp it and let dry. Got it now? Let me know in the comments. Of course, there are other cool surfaces you can create with your 3D pen, like imprinting textures into the surface. So check that out next. Here's the link.